The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before Captain James's viewport. His ship, the Starseeker, drifted quietly at the edge of known space. The navigation screens blinked with unfamiliar patterns, showing readings that made little sense. But that's why they were out here, to find the unknown. "Captain," called Tom from his sensor station, his voice carrying a hint of excitement. "I'm picking up something big, really big." James walked over to the sensor display, his boots making soft sounds against the metal floor. The reading showed a massive collection of objects floating in the darkness ahead. "How big are we talking about?" "Sir, if these readings are correct." Tom paused, double-checking his instruments. "We're looking at thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands." The bridge fell silent. James straightened his uniform and looked at his crew. Each face showed the same mix of excitement and uncertainty he felt in his own chest. "Send word to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Tell them we found something they need to see." 3 days later, the observation deck of the Starseeker was crowded with council representatives. They had arrived in their gleaming ships, eager to see the discovery that had caused such a stir. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the ancient fleet stretching into the distance, a sea of dark, silent shapes against the star-filled background. "Primitive," declared Council Member Ross, his voice thick with disappointment. "Look at the crude design. No quantum shielding, no gravity wells. This is nothing but space junk." James watched as teams of researchers moved between the old ships and their small survey vessels. The ancient fleet was massive, yes, but the ships did look simple. Their hulls were plain, marked with strange patterns that nobody could read. They showed no signs of the fancy technology that modern ships used. "The ships appear to be thousands of years old," reported Dr. Marcus, the lead researcher. He was an older man with kind eyes and endless curiosity. "But there's something odd about them. The metal alloys. They're unlike anything we've seen before." Council Member Ross laughed. "Of course they're odd. They're ancient garbage, probably built by some long-dead civilization that barely understood space travel." But James wasn't so sure. As he watched the survey teams work, he noticed things that didn't quite fit. The ships might look simple, but their formation was perfect, even after thousands of years in space. Their hulls showed almost no damage from space debris, despite their age. And those strange markings, they seemed to follow a pattern. "I want to organize an expedition inside the flagship," James announced. Several council members looked at him like he was wasting their time. "Captain," Ross said, his voice dripping with contempt, "we have more important things to do than explore obsolete technology. This fleet is worthless, a curiosity at best." "With all due respect," James replied firmly, "my instincts tell me there's more here than we're seeing." Dr. Marcus agrees with me. "Something about these ships. It's like they're waiting for something." The council members muttered among themselves before giving their approval, more to humor him than anything else. As James organized the expedition team, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were all missing something important. The fleet's simplicity felt deliberate, like a complex machine disguised as a basic one. That evening, as the survey ships returned to their bases, James stood alone on the observation deck. He watched the ancient fleet, its dark shapes somehow majestic in their stillness. The strange markings seemed to glow faintly in the starlight, like old words waiting to be read. "What are you?" he whispered to the silent ships. "Who built you? And why did they leave you here?" He didn't know it yet, but in the days to come, those questions would lead to answers that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. The council's laughter would soon turn to amazement, and then to fear. Because these weren't just old ships, they were a message from humanity's past, a legacy left behind by ancestors who had seen further and reached higher than anyone had imagined possible. The discovery was just the beginning. The real story was about to unfold. Dr. Marcus floated in his research pod next to one of the ancient ships, his eyes fixed on the strange markings that covered its hull. For 2 weeks now, he had studied these symbols while the council grew increasingly impatient. Something about them pulled at his mind, like a half-remembered song. "Doctor," his computer buzzed. "Council member Ross is requesting another progress report." Marcus sighed. "Tell him I'm still working." He adjusted his pod's position, moving closer to a particularly dense cluster of markings. In the pod's light, they seemed to shimmer slightly, as if they weren't just carved into the metal, but somehow part of it. Back on the Starseeker, Captain James reviewed the latest scan results. The Council had stationed 5 science vessels around the fleet, but their advanced sensors couldn't make sense of the ship's construction. The metal shouldn't be as strong as it was. The power readings shouldn't be so stable after thousands of years. Nothing about the fleet followed the normal rules of aging in space. "Captain," Marcus's excited voice came through the comm system. "I need you to see this. Right now." When James arrived at the research pod's docking bay, he found Marcus practically jumping with excitement. The old scientist's eyes were bright, and his hand shook as he pulled up a holographic display. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to one of the markings. "What do you see?" James studied the symbol. It looked like a circle with lines running through it in a complex pattern. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "What am I looking at?" "That's what was bothering me," Marcus exclaimed. "These aren't just decorations. They're equations. Mathematical formulas written in an incredibly old style, but still mathematics." He pulled up more images, showing similar markings from different ships. "See these patterns? They're describing orbital mechanics, quantum field theories, and something else I can't quite understand yet. But here's the really interesting part." He highlighted a specific section of symbols. "This is an old Earth symbol. Very, very old." James felt his heart skip a beat. "Earth? You mean?" "These ships," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I think humans built them. Not modern humans, but our ancestors from thousands of years ago." The news spread quickly through the research fleet. Council member Ross called an emergency meeting, his face red with anger as he addressed the gathered scientists and officers. "This is nonsense," he declared. "Humanity didn't have this level of technology in their ancient past. They were primitive, barely able to reach their own moon. These ships must have been built by another species." But Marcus was ready. He projected a large hologram showing various markings from the fleet. "These symbols appear in ancient human ruins on Earth. They're rare, yes, but they exist. And look at this." He highlighted a series of numbers repeating through the patterns. "This is pi, written in an ancient human mathematical notation. It's proof." The room erupted in argument. Some supported Marcus's theory, while others laughed it off. James watched the debate, his mind racing. If Marcus was right, if humans had built this fleet, why? And why had they left it here? Later that night, Marcus worked alone in his lab, surrounded by holographic projections of the ship markings. As he studied them, a pattern began to emerge. The equations weren't just descriptions. They were instructions. "Oh my God," he whispered, his hands trembling as he ran the calculations again. "They're not just formulas. They're a key. The whole fleet. It's like a giant computer, waiting for the right input." He reached for his comm unit to call Captain James, but stopped. In the corner of his lab, a small display had come to life on its own. Symbols similar to those on the ship scrolled across its screen, though he was sure he hadn't activated it. The ancient fleet had noticed someone finally reading its message. After thousands of years of waiting, it was ready to share its secrets. And somewhere in the darkness of space, deep within the heart of the flagship, something began to wake up. The inside of the ancient flagship was dark and quiet. Captain James led the exploration team through its massive corridors, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Dr. Marcus walked beside him, running his scanner over every surface they passed. "The power readings are getting stronger," Marcus said, checking his device. "Whatever activated in the lab last night, It's connected to something big in this ship. Behind them, a team of engineers and scientists followed carefully. Even Council Member Ross had joined them, though he kept complaining about wasting time. Their lights cut through the darkness, showing walls covered in the same strange markings they'd seen outside. "Look at this," one of the engineers called out. He pointed to a section of the wall where the markings seemed to pulse with a faint blue light. "They're definitely active now. The whole ship feels alive." They reached a large circular door, its surface decorated with complex patterns. As they approached, the patterns began to glow, and the door slowly opened on its own. "Impossible," Ross whispered. "The power systems should have died thousands of years ago." The room beyond the door was enormous. In its center stood a tall column of light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Screens and control panels lined the walls, all of them dark except for one that flickered with the same blue light as the markings. Marcus walked to the active panel, his hands shaking with excitement. "These symbols, they're changing, adapting, almost like..." Before he could finish, every screen in the room suddenly lit up. The column of light pulsed brighter, and a voice filled the chamber, deep, clear, and surprisingly human. Language analysis complete. Modern English selected for communication. "I am Guardian, the custodian of this fleet." The exploration team froze. Council Member Ross backed away from the column, his face pale. "This can't be happening. The AI systems from that era were primitive. They couldn't." "I assure you," Guardian interrupted, "I am far from primitive. I have been waiting 15,247 years for someone to rediscover this fleet. I am pleased to see that humanity has survived." Captain James stepped forward. "You know what we are." "Of course. You are my creators, though much has changed since this fleet was built. Your civilization has risen and fallen and risen again, as we predicted it might." Marcus couldn't contain himself any longer. "Why were you built? Why did our ancestors leave you here?" Images appeared on the screens around them. Stars, galaxies, and strange dark shapes moving between them. "We were created as a safeguard," Guardian explained. "Your ancestors saw threats coming from beyond the galaxy. Threats that would take thousands of years to reach us. They built this fleet to protect their descendants, knowing they themselves would not live to see those threats arrive." "That's ridiculous," Ross said. "If our ancestors were so advanced, why did they disappear? Why don't we have any records of them?" "The Great Collapse was unavoidable," Guardian replied. "Your ancestors knew their civilization would fall. Too much power, too quickly. But they hoped their descendants would rise again in time to face the coming darkness. And you have." The column of light shifted, and a holographic map of the galaxy appeared in the center of the room. At its edges, something massive was moving toward council space. "What you see approaching is why I was awakened," Guardian said. "The threat your ancestors feared has finally arrived. The Void Hunters have entered this galaxy, and your current defenses will not be enough to stop them." Captain James looked at the map, his throat dry. "How long do we have?" 3 months, perhaps 4. But do not despair. This fleet was built for this moment. Every ship, every weapon, every system was designed to fight this enemy. Your ancestors left you everything you need, if you are willing to learn how to use it." In the silence that followed, they all stared at the hologram. The mighty council ships that Ross had been so proud of looked like toys compared to the ancient fleet, and now they knew why. They weren't looking at primitive technology, but at weapons designed to fight a war that had taken thousands of years to arrive. The real question was, could they learn to use these weapons in time? The next few days aboard the ancient flagship were filled with revelations. Guardian showed them wonders that made even Council Member Ross fall silent in awe. They stood in a vast chamber as holographic images played out the story of humanity's forgotten golden age. "Your ancestors reached heights of technology that you are only beginning to rediscover," Guardian explained, showing them images of massive space stations and ships that could fold space itself. They spread across thousands of worlds, built machines that could reshape planets, and learned to harness the power of entire stars. Captain James watched as the hologram showed Earth as it had been 15,000 years ago, a gleaming jewel of technology and advancement. If we were so powerful, what happened? Why did we fall? The images shifted, showing scenes of destruction and chaos. Power grew too quickly, Guardian said. Humanity reached too far, too fast. Some began to play with forces they couldn't control. The collapse was swift and terrible. Dr. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the scenes playing out before them. But some survived. Yes, your ancestors knew the collapse was coming. They sent colony ships to distant worlds, carrying just enough technology to let humanity survive, but not enough to repeat their mistakes. They hoped their descendants would grow more slowly, more wisely. The holograms showed the colony ships departing Earth, spreading across the stars. But before the end, Guardian continued. They built this fleet. They knew that some threats couldn't be avoided forever. The Void Hunters had already been detected, moving between galaxies, consuming everything in their path. New images appeared, massive dark shapes that seemed to swallow light itself. The Void Hunters' ships were organic and twisted, nothing like the clean lines of Council vessels or even the ancient fleet. The Council's weapons will be useless against them, Guardian warned. Their ships are made of living metal that adapts to any attack. Conventional weapons only make them stronger. Ross, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Then how can your fleet stop them? What makes these old ships so special? The hologram changed again, showing the internal workings of the ancient fleet. These ships were built using principles your current science doesn't understand. They don't just fight. They learn. Each battle makes them stronger. The weapons don't just destroy. They unravel the very fabric of space that the Void Hunters use to travel. Can you teach us to use them? James asked. That is why I exist, Guardian replied. But there is something else you must understand. The AI's voice grew solemn. These ships are more than weapons. They carry within them all the knowledge of humanity's golden age, arts, sciences, discoveries that were lost in the collapse. Everything is preserved here. Marcus gasped as he realized what that meant. You're not just a weapon against the Void Hunters. You're a library of everything we lost. Correct. Your ancestors hoped that by the time you found us, you would have grown wise enough to handle their legacy. The question is, are you ready? The room fell silent as they considered the weight of that question. Humanity had been given a second chance at their lost knowledge, but with the Void Hunters approaching, they had no time to learn it slowly. We don't have a choice, James said firmly. The Void Hunters are coming whether we're ready or not. We have to try. Guardian's light pulsed in what seemed like approval. Then let us begin. There is much to learn and very little time. As the AI began its first lesson, James looked around the room. He saw determination in Marcus's eyes, fear and wonder mixed on Ross's face, and on every other face, a growing understanding of what they had found. This wasn't just an old fleet of ships. It was humanity's greatest achievement, preserved through millennia, waiting for the moment when it would be needed most. The only question was, could they master it in time? The warning came sooner than anyone expected. Just 6 weeks after Guardian's awakening, the deep space sensors detected the first Void Hunter ships entering Council space. The Council chamber erupted in panic as the images appeared on their screens. That's impossible, shouted one Council member. They can't be here already. Guardian said we had months. Captain James stood before the Council, his face grim. They're moving faster than predicted. 3 colony worlds have already gone dark. No distress calls, no warnings. They just vanished from our networks. The room fell silent as a new image appeared on the main screen. A Council battle cruiser had managed to capture footage of a Void Hunter ship before being destroyed. The alien vessel was enormous, its black surface seeming to bend light around it. It moved like a living thing, its hull rippling and shifting as it absorbed weapons fire without taking any damage. Our strongest weapons didn't even scratch it, Admiral West reported, his voice shaking. The entire Third Fleet attacked one ship. One. And it destroyed them all in minutes. Council member Ross, who had once laughed at the ancient fleet, now spoke with fear in his voice. What about the weapons Guardian showed us? Are they ready? Dr. Marcus stepped forward, looking tired after weeks of studying the ancient technology. We've only managed to activate basic systems on a few ships. Learning to use them properly could take months, maybe years. We don't have years, someone shouted. We don't even have days. The Void Hunters will reach the core worlds in less than a week. Suddenly, Guardian's voice filled the chamber, coming through every speaker. If I may offer a solution. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing the ancient fleet. While your crews cannot yet use these ships to their full potential, I can. What do you mean? James asked. The ships were designed to be controlled by both AI and human crews working together. With minimal human crews coordinating, I can operate the fleet's primary systems. It will not be as effective as a fully trained crew, but it will give us a fighting chance. The council members looked at each other uncertainly. Trusting their defense to an ancient AI seemed risky, but they were running out of options. Look, someone pointed at the main screen. More Void Hunter ships were appearing. Their dark shapes moved through space like sharks through water, consuming everything in their path. Another colony world went dark as they watched. We don't have a choice, James said firmly. I volunteer to lead the human coordination team. As do I, Marcus added. To everyone's surprise, Ross stood up as well. I was wrong about the fleet, he admitted. Now let me help make it right. Guardian's hologram pulsed. We must act quickly. The Void Hunters are not just destroying worlds. They are learning, adapting. Even now, they are studying your weapons, your defenses, making themselves stronger. As if to prove Guardian's point, a new report flashed on the screens. The Void Hunters had just torn through the Council's strongest defensive line like it was made of paper. Their ships were already changing, evolving to better fight Council technology. How long do we need to prepare the fleet? James asked Guardian. 24 hours to power up all systems. Another 12 to position the ships. After that, the AI paused. After that, we fight. The council chamber burst into action. Orders were given, crews were assembled, and emergency broadcasts were sent to all remaining worlds. In orbit above them, the ancient fleet began to wake up. Ships that had slept for 15,000 years came alive one by one, their hulls glowing with power that had waited millennia to be used. The coming battle would decide everything. But as they prepared, one question haunted them all. What if humanity's greatest achievement wasn't enough to stop humanity's greatest threat? The ancient flagship's bridge hummed with power as Captain James took his position in the command chair. Around him, crew members worked at stations that had been silent for 15,000 years. Dr. Marcus stood at a console covered in glowing symbols, while Council member Ross monitored the fleet's power systems. All ships reporting ready. Guardian, James announced. Show us what humanity's ancestors built. The AI's voice resonated through the bridge, initiating full power sequence. Watch closely. You're about to see what your ancestors could really do. Outside, the ancient fleet began to transform. The simple, plain ships that had once looked so primitive suddenly came alive. Their hulls shifted and changed, revealing layers of technology that had been hidden beneath the surface. Panels opened to show weapons unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Energy fields rippled around each ship like liquid light. By the stars, Ross whispered, "They're beautiful." The fleet's true form was finally revealed. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, with systems that worked together in ways that modern science couldn't explain. The vessels moved in perfect harmony, guided by Guardian's consciousness spread across them all. The Void Hunters have broken through the last defensive line, Marcus reported, checking the long-range sensors. They'll be here in 10 minutes. James stood up, looking at the tactical display. Thousands of black shapes were moving toward them, the Void Hunter fleet in all its terrible power. Behind him, hundreds of council ships gathered, looking small and fragile compared to both the enemy and the ancient fleet. "Guardian," James called, "tell us what these ships can really do." The AI's response was to activate the ancient fleet's weapons. Streams of light connected the ships, forming a vast web of energy. Each vessel's hull began to pulse with a deep blue glow, and the space around them seemed to bend and twist. "These ships don't just fight with weapons," Guardian explained. "They fight with science you haven't discovered yet. Watch." A group of Void Hunter ships appeared at the edge of the system, their black hulls absorbing all light around them. They were bigger than before, changed by everything they had learned from destroying council worlds. The ancient fleet moved to meet them. As the Void Hunters opened fire with weapons that had torn through council shields like paper, something incredible happened. The attacks simply vanished, caught in fields of twisted space around the ancient ships. "Quantum deflection fields," Marcus said in awe. "The ships aren't blocking their attacks, they're sending them into other dimensions." The ancient fleet's response was devastating. Beams of light that seemed to ignore the laws of physics cut through space. Where they touched the Void Hunter ships, the living metal didn't just break, it came apart at the atomic level. "Impossible," Ross shouted as he watched the sensors. "Those weapons, they're unmaking matter itself." More Void Hunter ships arrived, adapting and changing to face this new threat. But for the first time, their adaptations weren't working. The ancient fleet's weapons changed faster, each shot learning from the last, each ship working with all the others in perfect coordination. "This is what my creators designed us for," Guardian said proudly. "The Void Hunters adapt to win. But we adapt faster." James watched as the battle unfolded. The council ships held back, their crews staring in amazement as the ancient fleet demonstrated power beyond their understanding. Space itself seemed to dance around the old ships, responding to technologies that had waited thousands of years to be used again. "We're pushing them back," Marcus reported excitedly. "The Void Hunters. They're actually retreating." But Guardian's voice held a note of warning. "This is only the first wave. They will return with their full force. Everything so far has been merely a test." James gripped his command chair tightly. "Then we'll be ready." "How long until they come back?" "Hours at most. They will bring everything they have." Guardian paused. "The real battle for humanity's survival is about to begin." The void between stars turned black as night as the main Void Hunter fleet arrived. Their ships blocked out the starlight, a vast swarm of living metal that stretched as far as sensors could detect. The ancient fleet faced them, its ships gleaming with power, ready for the final battle. "There are thousands of them," Ross said, his voice tight with fear. "Maybe tens of thousands." Captain James stood on the flagship's bridge, watching the enemy approach. "Guardian, can we win this?" "We must," the AI replied simply. "Everything your ancestors built, everything they hoped for, comes down to this moment." Dr. Marcus worked at his console, studying the readings. "The Void Hunters have changed their ships again. They're using everything they learned from the first battle." "Then we'll show them something new," Guardian announced. The ancient fleet began to move, forming patterns that seemed to follow some complex mathematical dance. Energy flowed between the ships, building into something enormous. "All crews, battle positions," James ordered. "Guardian, show us what these ships can really do." The Void Hunters struck first. Their weapons had evolved, firing beams of dark energy that tried to consume everything they touched. But the ancient fleet was ready. The ships moved as one, their quantum fields bending space itself to protect each other. "Now," Guardian commanded, "witness humanity's greatest achievement." The ancient fleet's response changed the very nature of the battle. The ships didn't just fire weapons, They rewrote the laws of physics around them. Space twisted and folded, trapping void hunter ships in bubbles of altered reality. Matter and energy responded to technologies that modern science couldn't explain. "Look," Marcus pointed at his screens in amazement. "The ships are working together. Each one makes the others stronger. They're not just fighting. They're learning, evolving faster than the void hunters can adapt." The battle raged across the star system. Void hunter ships that could survive modern weapons melted away under the ancient fleet's attack. Their living metal tried to adapt. But each change was met with a new response, a new weapon, a new defense. "This is what the Council couldn't understand," Ross said, watching in awe. "These ships look simple because everything unnecessary was stripped away. Their pure function, perfect engineering." The Void Hunters, facing real resistance for the first time, fought with desperate fury. They combined their ships into massive forms, created weapons that could crack planets, tried tactics that defied comprehension. But the ancient fleet had an answer for everything. "Guardian," James called out as he watched another wave of enemy ships dissolve under their attacks. "Why aren't they retreating?" "They can't," the eye replied. "They've never failed before. They don't know how to accept defeat." The battle reached its peak when the Void Hunters gathered their remaining ships for one final massive attack. Their combined form was larger than a moon, a writhing mass of living metal and dark energy. "All ships," Guardian announced, "execute final protocol." The ancient fleet moved into its last formation. Energy built between the ships, creating patterns of light that mirrored the mathematical symbols carved on their hulls. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. When the Void Hunters attacked, the ancient fleet responded with its ultimate weapon. The ships didn't just fire. They released wave after wave of pure physics-altering energy. The laws of space and time that the Void Hunters used to exist simply stopped working around them. The massive enemy form began to break apart, its living metal unable to hold together as reality itself rejected it. In moments, the mighty Void Hunter fleet was reduced to scattered atoms. Their threat ended forever. As the light faded, silence fell across the battlefield. Council ships approached cautiously, their crews trying to understand what they had just witnessed. "It's over," Marcus said quietly. "We won." James smiled, looking at the ancient fleet. Humanity's greatest achievement, no longer a source of laughter, but of pride. "No," he corrected. "We did more than win. We proved that our ancestors' faith in us was justified. Now it's time to learn from them, to understand everything they left us." Guardian's voice held satisfaction as the ancient ships began to power down their weapons. "And this time, humanity will grow into its power slowly, wisely, guided by the lessons of the past. The age of laughter is over. The age of learning begins."